to the way we interact with existing clients and develop new relationships, what can we do to prepare for that reality? That, I think, is a topic that everyone needs to know about. We all want to get together and talk about different ways to do that. So very, very opportune. What should our business partner members expect from community associations in terms of contractual demands? And how can both sides work together for mutual benefit? Another thing that we're going to need to really dive into. In what ways have the stay-at-home orders changed the way we view virtual meetings and alternative work arrangements? I mean, this is it. Let's dive into that as well. All right, so let me okay. We're going to dive into our speakers. So today, our first speaker is Steve Mlenak. Steve is a partner at the Redevelopment and Land Use and Real Estate Departments at Greenbaum, Rowe, Smith & Davis. As a member of the firm's Community Association Practice Group, he maintains a strong focus in the niche area of community association law, providing strategic guidance and general counseling to condominium and homeowners association clients across the broad range of legal issues. His work encompasses the interpretation and amendment of governing documents and bylaws, drafting contracts, collection of delinquent assessments, the enforcement of rules and regulations, operational and maintenance issues, the fiduciary responsibility of board members, transition negotiations and litigation, municipal services, act compliance, and alternative dispute resolution. That's a lot. Steve, that's a lot.
Our marketing department is really good at making what I do much sexier than it really is. That's for sure.
Wow, Steve, you're really busy.
We're not done yet. I still got more. He further represents clients in construction defect litigation, fair housing discrimination cases, and landlord-tenant matters. An active member of CAI New Jersey, Mr. Mlenak currently serves as vice chair of the membership committee. My condolences, Steve.
Yes.
He was recognized with CAI New Jersey's 2016 Speaker of the Year Award and was shared recipient of the 2014 Committee of the Year Award for his work as a member of CAI New Jersey's National Legislative Action Committee, New Jersey. He is a graduate of the University of Connecticut, received his law degree from Rutgers University School of Law, Newark, and is admitted to practice in New Jersey and New York.
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, and that's our scheduled show. We'll talk to everybody later. No, very, I'm actually really looking forward to what we have to talk about, Steve, so we'll dive into it. Our next speaker today is Gabriel Levine. Gabriel is a Vice President of Wealth Management and Portfolio Manager at UBS Financial Services. His practice revolves around assisting families and businesses in planning, goal setting, and managing their finances effectively. Gabe is very active in the business and nonprofit community with a strong focus on workforce development, poverty alleviation, and individual advocacy. Gabriel is the president of the Board of Trustees for Elijah's Promise, a local nonprofit maintaining New Brunswick's community kitchen, catering program, and culinary school, helping to alleviate poverty and fight food insecurity. He is currently the chair of the Middlesex County Workforce Development Board, as well as chairing the board's Youth Advisory Committee. He sits on the board of directors of the Middlesex County Regional Chamber of Commerce, where he serves as the chair for the Emerging Leaders Committee. He also sits on the Advisory Council and the Gala Committee for the State Theater of New Jersey and New Brunswick. Gabriel's passionate. Everybody muted? Gabriel is passionate about nonprofit work. He has helped to plan an executive events for BMS Children's Hospital, the Alzheimer's Association, Zonta International, and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, as well as giving time and fundraising support for the United Way, Restore the Shore, and the Boy Scouts of America. To name a few, Gabe currently resides in Colts Neck with his wife Jacqueline and sons Jacob and Liam, where he is board president of his homeowners association. I don't know why you chose to do that, Gabe. The Grand at Colts Neck. In his free time, he enjoys woodworking and carpentry, playing the drums, and is an avid golfer. I have to tell you, I've never met someone who volunteers more than you do, Gabe. It's like you're a glutton.
It keeps me very busy.
Right, I'd say. But in your free time, carpentry and woodworking. So.
Right, exactly. Lots of free time.
So looking forward to what you have to say. Next up, we've got Kerri Stimpson. I think a lot of us here are very familiar with Kerri. Kerri's been in this industry for a long time, which is incredible because she's only 25 years old.
Thanks.
You got it. Kerri's a regional vice president with Taylor Management Company. She has over 18 years of experience managing community associations. Kerri's responsible for and overseeing the operations of Taylor Management clients in the southern region, which are comprised into different style communities such as mid-rise, carriage homes, lifestyle communities, and condo associations and HOAs. Kerri is an active member of CAI and is a past chair of CAI New Jersey's Managers Committee. So welcome, Kerri. I'm sure you can get
I knew that everybody else was going to have so much in their bios. Mine would have had a lot more in it.
Kerri, let's just say I appreciate your bio. Steve and Gabe, not so much.
Thanks, Rod.
All right, last but definitely not least is Amy Shorter. Amy is the Director of Marketing for PuroClean Restoration Services. Amy speaks regularly at women's organizations, Rotary clubs, chambers of commerce, insurance companies, and real estate agencies. She holds several certifications in the restoration field and is a member of several professional organizations in the tri-state area. Amy is currently a committee member of the membership committee for Community Associations Institute of New Jersey. PuroClean is a fire, water, mold, and biohazard restoration company, on the biohazard, working with insurance companies, real estate companies, homeowners, commercial and residential property managers. PuroClean's team understands that water, fire, mold, and property damage can cause an unexpected and stressful disruption to people's daily, to people's daily lives. Our role goes beyond just repairing the property. Our mission, when property damage occurs, PuroClean is driven to provide an unmatched service experience that is handled quickly, professionally, ethically, and with compassion, resulting in peace of mind for all concerned. All right, I need a glass of water. That was a lot, but if everybody was in the same room, I'd say a round of applause for our speakers, Kerri Stimpson, Amy Shorter, Steve Mlenak, and Gabe Levine. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to dive into the questions that are going to direct the way that we push our talk. So our title for today, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, what's our new normal? Steve, I want to direct this one to you first. Everybody can fill in if they need to. We've talked about the good, the bad, the ugly. Is there anything good coming out of this new normal?
I think so. And you know, as you mentioned at the beginning, we're all sick of Zoom calls, right? What used to take a couple of minutes to walk down a hallway or give somebody a call or shoot somebody an email or a text, everything's got to be a Zoom call now. So what used to be a 3-minute, endeavor is now suddenly become a scheduled event. I think that'll start going away. But I think what we're learning, all of us, is the benefits of being able to be virtually connected to one another, to build relationships with one another virtually. For association members, and I'm sure Gabe will talk about it more, learning that the old ways of, you go to a workshop, you go to a meeting, and I'll see you next month, may not necessarily be the way that we can conduct business going forward. That, there are decisions that need to be made on a more frequent basis, and those decisions can be made virtually. So I think that's an education that a lot of us are receiving. That's for the benefit. Me personally, as an attorney, what I'm seeing and excited about is the ability to serve my clients in a way that I never was before. Being able to see board members and interact with board members that previously I could only do, attending a meeting, which I do, at most 6, sometimes 8 times a year, but for most, it's much less than that. Being able to jump on a Zoom and actually see and directly interact with board members. Also, being able to do more than one meeting in the same night, which I've done multiple times, and I'm actually going to do Monday night for one of Kerri's clients' associations. Being able to jump on, a meeting for a client that's in Monmouth County, and then 20 minutes later, hang up and dial into an association that's up in Bergen County. Could never do that before, and I'm being able to provide services to those clients. And on the same issue, I've had many associations in the past say, no, you know what, it's not worth, you driving up here an hour, sitting with us for a half an hour, driving back an hour, send us an email. And that's good. It saves them money, but at the same time, it doesn't help build those relationships and be able to bounce ideas back and forth with one another. Now, with this virtual connectivity, we're able to have that direct link that board members are saying, all right, well, you don't have to drive anywhere, sit in your bedroom and Zoom in for a half an hour. You can talk with us, and that's it. And it saves them money, gets them the answers they want. and it builds the relationship. So for me, those are the positives that I've seen.
I'd like to just dovetail on when Ryan asked his question, who's sick of Zoom calls, raise your hand. I actually didn't raise my hand because I like the Zoom calls because I like to be connected with my professionals, like such as Steve said, but it's a great way to stay connected with your clients and with the managers, with the people that I work for. Because a lot of times we were on conference calls. So basically the same thing as a conference call, but you get to see people and you really build those relationships. And I think that that's what's so important. It's a matter of, you don't have to get in your car and drive. So we're very easily accessible to our clients, to our boards. And I think that that's great, especially at this time, but moving forward, especially with those, I know we're not going to talk about the DCA changes in the Radburn Act, but because of the requirements for those managers that, you know what I'm talking about, that we have to have open meetings to vote on things. This is such an easy way. Within 7 days, boom, we're having an open meeting. We don't have to worry about scheduling. That it has always been a problem for sites that don't have large clubhouses, is where we're going to have this. We're going to have it right here on Zoom. So I think that this has been a huge benefit, Zoom too. What's a huge benefit?
I mean, I'll add a big one just to take a step back too is family, right? That we're all home a lot more. So hopefully we're all, you know, deepening the relationships with our spouses, parents, children. I think that's really important, which leads me to a great segue that I've my 1-year-old and my 3-year-old here with me today. So extraneous noises or I leave the screen for the second, that's where I went. Piggybacking on what Steve said, I mean, I'm in the financial services business. We meet with clients face to face. We meet with boards, right? It's all about interpersonal relationships and connections, looking someone in the eye, shaking their hand. So I don't like this new normal in general, but that being said, I love the virtual connectivity and people realizing that, you know, it doesn't matter how far apart we are, it's very easy to come together on a platform like this. And in terms of picking up the phone, text messaging, shooting emails, you know, a lot of the vendors I work with, clients I work with, partners I work with, you know, we're all talking every single day through one of those mediums. And I think that helps a lot when it comes to brainstorming and coming up with ideas, whether it's, you know, as a board member, whether it's as a business owner, whatever it might be, to make sure that we're, you know, moving forward in the right direction together.
Yeah. So, you know, really moving from that, where the question being, what's the good that's come out of this? You know, I think virtually being connected, I mean, that's the reason we named it this. It really is, you know, from my perspective, again, also, that's the best thing to come out of this because we can be so quickly connected so easily. So, Kerri, I actually wanted to elaborate. I wanted you to elaborate on something too. So we've all had to deal with emergencies in communities, and this emergency has been going on for 3 months now. What are you doing? You're on the front lines right now to cope with that now inside your community.
I mean, we had Sandy. That was an emergency that lasted a bit of a time, but it certainly didn't last 3 months. We've had emergencies in buildings where you had a fire, which is a tragedy, or maybe you had a roof blow off, which was a tragedy, but it's a one-time event and you have very specific direction. With this, every day is an emergency. Every day something different is coming at us. There's new guidelines, there's new direction, what's opening, what's not opening, how is it opening? It's, to be honest, it's very, very stressful. The managers are very stressed. I think that the board members are very stressed. I think our vendors are stressed because the vendors perhaps want to come into the community to do work and they might be getting pushback from a board because the board's not ready to bring people back into the community. So it's hard. So what are we doing? Taking a lot of deep breaths. We're taking a lot of deep breaths to get through it. And I must say, again, I'm not, selling Zoom stock or anything like that, but at Taylor, we have, the executive team has meetings. We're having them every day. And now we have them like 4 times a week. And part of that meeting is to discuss the business at hand and the issue that we need to discuss. but it's also an opportunity to just let your hair down and to let it all out, because you have to do that with people that understand what it is that you're going through. Otherwise, if you keep it all bottled inside, you're going to pop. And the last person that we want to pop on is our clients, our residents. We all work, no matter who's on this call, the people that live in our associations are our clients. And this building is, this industry is about customer service. And they're the last people that we need to pop on, because we might be getting the feedback from them. So we really just need to, stay focused with each other. And when you can, let it out with your peers. That's one of my suggestions. Not sure how everybody else is doing it, but it's letting it out. My peers know how I'm feeling. And sometimes I realize that my bad day or what I just went through isn't nearly what they went through. And it gives you a sense of appreciation.
Yeah. So you mentioned something when you first started answering that question, and it was, you still have projects going on, and how do you deal with that? So I'm going to throw that right at Amy. Amy, you're probably seeing a lot of these projects either being delayed or not being delayed, and how are you handling the projects when you do have to go on site?
So it's interesting because we haven't had a stop of business. We received our first call about assisting with COVID prior to the closing of most of the businesses and schools here in the state of New Jersey. We got a call from government buildings in Trenton that we're going to have to stay open. So we have some background and knowledge because we do biohazard remediation. We've worked with the AIDS Society in Newark for a long time on proper procedure for our guys who are certified to be able to go in and clean making sure that they're safe and the environment that they go into becomes safe. So the only issues with us is that we had no idea exactly at the beginning what we were looking at. So we kind of had to pull the pieces together and move as fast as possible, but at the same time try to put some safety and regulation down in our own workplace because there wasn't really any guidelines out there yet. On the side of the communities, we have some challenges because emergencies happened, and we had a fire situation, and we also had a water loss situation where you have on the side of the homeowner or the facility, they don't want someone coming in because they're worried for their own health and safety. So making sure that they understand that no matter if it's a fire, if it's a COVID situation, if it's a mold or a water loss situation, those emergencies still need to be remediated and taken care of, because a small problem, as what we have seen over the last couple of weeks, left alone turns into a larger issue or problem. And someone still needs to come in and do the work and get the situation taken care of. We required all of our guys to wear full PPE, and each one of them has their own cartridges and respirators. And whether it was just viewing something that was mold or whether viewing something that was much more serious, we just put a standard in place that no matter what, because we have to make sure that our guys are protected, but we have to make sure that the people they're coming in contact with in the least amount of contact. Love the Zoom for the same reason, Kerri. You can get in front of the person, you can have that conversation that needs to happen, but you still have that face-to-face, which is so important in our business, is to be face-to-face with people, because when they lose that contact, they kind of lose a little of the trust. So continuing to do that, it has really been a challenge, but one that every week we've been getting on calls and adapting to the situation because our business never stopped.
Right. So in that, where you've got all of these things that you have going on and you're kind of dealing with it reactively, I would say, because who knows what tomorrow is going to hold. Is there certain things that as a contractor, as a vendor that serves these communities, there's certain things that, or lessons that you've learned, certain things you know are going to be concrete moving forward?
Yeah, you have to make personal contact. People want to talk through the situation. They don't want to be talked at. They want the situation to be talked through with you. And whether, you're a painter, or whether you're, a pool person, whether you're a remediation person, they really want to share their fears or frustrations about the situation and how that can be best managed in a way that minimizes fear, but still gets the job done. So really making that more personal contact has been really important on this end, so that people feel a greater sense of security. You can't give a person 100% security, but if you're not even willing to get on the phone with them or talk them through the situation, they're less likely to get the work done or get the situation taken care of that needs to be taken care of.
If I can add to that, just from a personal experience, it's been, telling to me the different ways that different business vendors have reacted and adjusted to this. And to Amy's point, it is all about building those personal relationships. We had, me personally, we've been staying at home since March whenever, like the rest of us, and we had an electrical problem and we needed to hire an electrician. And the first one we called, it was, well, we haven't really let anybody in the house. What steps are you guys doing? And it's, all right, if you want us to wear a mask, we'll wear a mask. But it was so indifferent. And that led us to somebody else who, this is our policy. Here it is. It's written. I can send it to you. This is what all our guys are trained in doing. And it was a no-brainer of who to go with. So, having a recognition for the times that we're in, and everybody's different sensitivities towards what they're looking for with respect to that security, I think goes a long way in developing new relationships, both business and personal.
Yeah, opening doors, cleaning your way in, cleaning your way out with common touch spaces. We had a pest control situation in our house. We had a family of, I think, raccoons that decided to take up space. And, although it was in an area that we are not commonly in, they still had to come in, and they were very respectful of wearing masks, wearing gloves, cleaning on the way out, all of the common touch spaces. It's that extra sense of security. So.
Well, I think, for me too, I'm also trying to have as much communication with our clients as possible. And what is changing for me is, well, the look of the board meeting and the feel of the board meeting. Now it's, Steve, I think you said it, now you can take care of 3-4 a night if you needed to, as opposed to just the one driving all over the place. So I think that that's really what's changing for us. Now, the other thing I want to say, we've got some vendor perspective. Well, what's changed for you as to how we deal with the clients? Well, Gabe, you're volunteering every place under the planet. Now you have to be communicating with the rest of your board. How has that changed for you?
Yeah, so we've always used like group chat and email and things like that to maintain contact. It's interesting because going into this year, we decided to space out board meetings a little bit more. We were doing them monthly, and then maybe you'd have one person show up, maybe no one, maybe it was the same person who showed up 2 or 3 months in a row. So it's been a little bit of a learning curve in terms of dealing with the population in the community because there's not as much contact, but things are also really good. We work with Steve's firm. They do a great job on the legal side. Residents are really happy. So we've made sure that through all of this, the board members are communicating on a frequent basis. As president, my vice president, our property manager, the three of us have a group text, and the three of us talk basically every day about what's going on. It's interesting, going back to something that was said before on Kerri's end in terms of being in this new normal, is one of the big issues we see from our property manager side is that everybody's home, right? And when everybody's home, it's very easy for them to complain. So while we have a very, very, call it a prosperous community, we have a community that runs very well. There's very few complaints, which is excellent. Now in this environment, we see more coming from residents because they're just sitting home, it's nice out, and they're upset about something. So they feel the need to come up to my wife and I when we're walking, or our vice president who's very popular in the neighborhood, and that's okay, right? But we need to make sure as a board we're kind of putting a strong front out there that we're communicating with the residents. We signed up for one call a few years ago, so we can text, call, or email any alert in one shot. So we use that pretty frequently. Information to the residents, but I think it's just really important on the board's end to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page and understand that we're all, you know, on the same team. We're in this together, and how can we make sure that the residents of the community are you know, in a good spot. And then I'll add one thing. So the other side of that is now dealing with the vendors, right? And that's where we see a little bit more difficulty, that when we had something that we wanted to shop or bid, or we had a concern with something, it was, okay, why don't you come to our next board meeting, right? Or why don't you meet, I have a flexible schedule, meet the property manager, the vice president, and I at the clubhouse, and we could sit down and we could work through this. We could present it to the board. Those are some places where we've had a little bit more difficulties since no one's meeting in public. And that's where it, again, the virtual communication, I think, is ideal, that we're able to have these conversations over Zoom or over phone or whatever it might be, and be able to make sure that we're communicating with our vendors and they're communicating with us, and the neighborhood's running smoothly.
Yeah,
And
so
I'm just gonna just Gabe, a little bit on that with your board meetings. Something that we've seen is that we've actually seen a large increase in board attendance at board meetings, doing them via either a Zoom call or a Zoom webinar, that many more residents are attending. So that's a good thing that they're attending. They're engaged. They're able to hear firsthand all of the steps that the board has gone through. We've actually had some vendors attend those meetings via Zoom. So I think that that's a good thing. And it's letting the homeowners voice their concern, and I'm going to call them concerns as opposed to complaints, trying to be positive here. It's letting those homeowners voice their concerns in a manner that we can all equally see them. So again, I think that this part of it really has been a blessing.
And you can't mute people in real life.
No, correct. You can't mute them. So
I mean, that's the best point right there that you made. You can't mute people in real life. But no, seriously, Gabe, what you talked about was your level of communication to your residents. And this, I want to pick Kerri and your brain. In your communities, how are the residents? What's the temperature? No pun intended, of these
Right.
residents. You know, whether they're communicating or not.
I want to say it's changing. The temperature is changing. The temperature was, a lot of the residents were concerned. They didn't know what was going on, so to speak. So they had a lot more patience. And now their patience is growing very, very weak and very thin, if you will. And it's coming out. It's coming out, I think, and the managers are the ones that are feeling it. The temperature is changing because the residents, they want, and I don't mean to talk about the 4-letter word pool, but they want to see that their pool open. They want to go back to normal. And as much as we try to communicate with them, all of the things that have to be taken into consideration in order to open up that tennis court, open up that clubhouse, open up that pool, why maybe why the parking lot hasn't been repaved yet. It's getting them to understand that, and they're growing a little weary is what they're doing, I must say. And I don't mean to be negative, but that's a challenge for us. It is.
So I'll talk about 2 shifts we've seen. One that's similar to what Kerri mentioned, and one that's more on the COVID side. So definitely with the weather getting better and people being outdoors more, there's more communication, right? There's more people coming up to us, asking us questions, asking what's going on. Absolutely. I mean, the pool has been the biggest point of contention, and we've been kind of pushing doing a meeting in this format until we had more clarity. And now that the clarity is 99%, aside from the liability aspect, you know, it's time to get in front of the residents and really let them know what's going on, as disappointed as they're going to be. The other shift that we've seen on the COVID front, and this actually happened pretty early on, where we had individuals reaching out. I had a neighbor, a woman I love, so sweet, who, Jacob, give me a minute, buddy, who, sorry about that, who had threatened to call the cops because she saw kids congregating in one of the common areas. Now, this was very early on. And about a month later, 3 of my neighbors, they're all older women, good friends, are in front of my house, and the 3 of them are going for a walk together. The one sister was on hospice. She was going every day to visit her sister at a long-term care facility. And here's the woman, they're all standing next to each other, arm to arm. None of them are wearing masks, and they're going on a walk. And only 3 weeks earlier, had sent an email to our property manager threatening to call the cops on children who are congregating. So it was interesting. And I said a lot of this happened early on, seeing those shifts where people being in their homes for this period of time, and they wanted out, right? They wanted to do something, their mentalities changed. And now what I think we've seen, and going to Kerri's point, a lot of that has now translated to, these are my concerns regarding the community, because that's where they're now focused on that as opposed to COVID issues. And it's been challenging overall, but we're making the best of it. And like anybody else, we're just trying to do the right thing for the residents, but also protect the association.
The one thing that I can't say enough, the more we communicate with our residents, with our boards, with each other, with the vendors, it's so important because, and even if we're communicating that we don't have an answer, we just need to let them know that we're working on solving these problems or trying to come up with the best plan. Because it's when the residents don't hear from their manager that they're just like, oh, what's going on? So, I mean, we've been sending out emails daily. I mean, just, you need to communicate. That's paramount. I can't stress that enough. This business is all about customer service.
And I love one call. It's so easy. I have access, the VP has access, the property manager has access, and it's so easy to go in, you type up a message, it shoots it out to everybody, leaves them a voicemail, it texts them, and it shoots them an email, which is, really ideal to stay in front of people.
For sure. So I think that the overarching theme here is that over communicating is the idea. Without that communication, I think everyone's left in the dark. Maybe equating it to, the board and management is making decisions on a daily basis with information that they're kind of working through. At the end of the day, if you've made 100 yards worth of progress and no one knows that you have, they're going to second guess your progress every yard. So I think over communication is definitely the key. And that's where I think, Steve, you're going to get involved with a lot of that communication, what you can say, what you can't say, and in that, let's talk about maybe a little bit of the formal communication that we have between vendors, contracts that we're going to be writing. What are these contracts going to look like going forward?
Yeah. So when I first started practicing in this area of law, Bob Griffin told me that most problems with community associations start with the letter P. You have pools, pets, poop, pests, parking, people, of course, and now we have pandemics. So, these are a lot of issues that we're learning as we went over the last 3 months. So early on, it was, well, how do we interpret our existing contracts, our existing vendor relationships, the projects that we have going on? What is the language in there that protects associations, and conversely, what protections are there for vendors? And there was a lot of interpretation on that. I'm sure many of the business owners on the call are now fully familiar with the term force majeure, which has been interpreted in various contexts over the last 3 months, and what it means, how it can be interpreted in various contexts. There's also other doctrines of law known as impossibility and frustration of purpose. So we've had to analyze on a case-by-case basis those contracts to see how it applies. But if we're talking today, the purpose of this call is, what is the new normal going to be? What are we going to look for after really this is all over? I certainly think the contracts that we put in place are going to be reflective of that. We now know that there is an area that we need protection in. So does that mean building in force majeure language for discretionary projects for associations that did come to me, and I'm sure others on this call, that say, hey, we're really concerned about what our revenue is going to look like over the next year with this. We have, a population that's, losing their jobs. Are we going to be able to still do this discretionary project, or can we get out of it? On the vendor side, what protections do the vendors have to complete a project by a date certain in a contract? If they can't get supplies, if there are labor shortages, if they're not able to adequately protect their employees or protect the client themselves through PPE or other means just by the nature of the project. So I certainly think going forward, it's going to be important for associations, council, and for business partners to look at the contracts, to look at those provisions and anticipate, and not just for a second wave that happens and, they're saying, the fall, but going forward, this could happen again. Another thing to start thinking about for contracts is what protections do you as an association or a manager want to build in with your contractors to make sure that they are adequately following all safety measures? It's something I always had in my contracts, but certainly it's beefed up now to incorporate the provisions that are in Governor Murphy's various orders, social distancing, the use of PPE and things like that, so that the association and its members are protected.
This is Amy. I just wanted to jump in on that because over the course of the many weeks that this has all been playing out, we've been with companies who have either had to stay open or have already reopened. And so what that looks like is really different for people who have been staying home. And something that a lot of these companies are doing are talking about disaster preparedness and disaster planning, because although, as things open up, there is the overwhelming opinion that things will temporarily shut down again. Maybe not as universal as it was before, but every company, or every association, even in your own home, you should be developing some sort of contingency disaster plan, because it really does interrupt a business or your daily life, and it could stop critical services from happening. So developing some sort of plan of being proactive about what to do in those different kinds of scenarios, whether it's going to be a temporary thing or it might be a more permanent situation. It's the time to do it is now. The time to talk about it and to prepare for something. We see in a lot of the businesses that have opened, we were in one scenario where it was construction, and they have a tent, and you have to go in and you have to get scanned with the thermometer, and you get logged in that you're on site and that you have no temperature and that you didn't take any medication and haven't come in contact with anyone that day. And you're wearing your proper mask, and if you didn't have a mask, that you were given a mask by the company. So it is interesting. There's some companies who are really putting in some solid guidelines for health and safety for their employees. And then there's some that haven't gone that direction yet. So I think we're in this stage now where everybody's kind of evaluating everybody else's game plan. So having one or starting to develop one, and you can go on the ReadyGov site, and it's a great place to pull down some of these templates of planning for disaster and preparedness. And just for instance, if the key employee or the key person that manages your associations gets sick and they have all of the passwords to all of the things that you need on the computers, that just is a complete stop right there. So developing those plans is really important, and there's definitely an ability. Even the Gov site has an app, which everybody can pull down the app together and have all the information that they need on their phones if they're displaced.
Yeah. What I think
just add
about that, and maybe Kerri can talk about it as well, because I'm sure she's gone through it with Sandy and all that. After disasters, it's not uncommon to go to ready.gov and to put together a comprehensive plan of, okay, here's a binder. This is steps A through Z of what we do after something like this happens. And after a while, that gets put on the top shelf somewhere, and people forget about it. And then the disaster comes in. What do we do? So it's important to not only have those plans, but to constantly remind ourselves that we do have them, and then when something happens, to go to them. Kerri?
Yes, I think it's important to have them. You have to revisit them, and you have to learn from them, because I think every everybody learned things from Sandy that might not have been in the first plan. So they put that in the next version of the plan. I'm sure that, I think one of Ryan's questions to me was, this emergency's been going, it's not just a singular emergency. This has been going on for 3 months now. That this plan is ever evolving, and it's important. And not only, I think that's what's important about this plan, is to make sure that we're looking at it from everybody's perspective, the manager's perspective, the board's perspective, your residents' perspective, your vendor's perspective. It needs to be an all-encompassing plan, if you will. Yes.
Right. And the faster you get a plan in place and get yourselves organized, you can get back up and running quicker. And when you don't have something in place, we've seen it time and time again, not just with Sandy, but during this COVID situation, we have seen a number of businesses that we've been on the tail end, because we'll have to come in and do overnight cleaning with and sanitization because they had an employee that tested positive. It's important to start that dialogue of, okay, well, let's lay down some grassroots so that we can turn around in the 4 days or 17 days time and reopen again, because the goal is to reopen and create a positive environment. We can't do that if everyone is looking at all the negative and all the bad stuff that's going on without any kind of game plan whatsoever.
I think, from my industry, of course, everything is document, have a written plan of action, implement that plan, have a point person. I mean, that's all we've been talking about. So I couldn't agree more. So we've talked about the good, the bad, the ugly. We've talked about what's working. Zoom calls, communication is key. Gabe talked about that for a little while. I mean, how we're communicating is ideal. What are these contracts going to look like? I think that, Steve, more than anything, the vendors are going to be the ones that most of this is going to be pushed off to, as our communities try to push risk as much as they can off to the vendors that are coming on site. So I think we're going to see a lot of those changes. And staying on top of all of this has been a difficult task, a daunting task. We're on these calls often. Kerri, I think you said it's a daily call at Taylor. That's just to stay on top of what might be the next piece of information. So that being said, I think all 4 of our speakers can add one more topic to the call, which is how is it that you're finding value in what CAI is providing for you, whether it's a solid vendor network or talks like these, getting people together. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
go ahead, Kerri.
Those 2 things themselves are, whenever I'm asked for a new vendor or to make a recommendation for a vendor, the CAI book is always the book that I go to. So I think the book is important, but it's having those relationships with the people in the book is as equally as important. So it's having CAI help us maintain that moving forward is critical.
Yeah, I'll throw on my CAI New Jersey membership committee hat for a second, and on top of what we're doing here, all this new law, all these constant Zooms, and the educational seminars that we're all taking advantage of. There's so much more to CAI. It's for some it is that education, for others it is building the relationships and potentially building your client portfolio if you're a business partner. For me, one of the things I've really leaned on in the last 3 months is my professional relationships that I've built, not necessarily with my clients and others in CAI, but with my direct competitors. I've over the last 8 years I've been a member of CAI. First, being part of the LAC committee and now the membership committee, and then, various other, volunteer positions. I've developed great relationships with other attorneys, with my peers, my competitors. And those relationships have proven fruitful, that we're able to ourselves get on the horn together, have conversations, shoot emails, bounce ideas back and forth. We're in the Wild West for a lot of this stuff. So being able to talk and have relationships with people who, not every attorney knows community association law. Or the niche, areas that fall under that. So being able to have those relationships, and I imagine it's got to be the same for managers as well, and for other types of business partners. Another thing for CAI that I think is one of the unsung benefits really of CAI is their ADR program. And despite us all working from home, despite all the issues that we have in our workplace, you know, communities are still running, problems still, evolve, and ADR is still a necessary. And I often talk to managers and that when ADR comes up, the issue and, oh, how are we going to do this? We got to convene a committee. We got to find somebody. When are we going to do this? I say, just join CAI. It's a couple $100 relatively when you think about it, to have a trained independent mediator who goes through a good training process with CAI. Often it's an attorney. They're independent and they're able to, resolve your disputes independent from your association. That's still going on despite the pandemic. They're doing it virtually, so that you're not backed up when that all opens up. So those are my thoughts on the membership.
It's funny you should say that, Steve, because I never really thought about that point about your competitors. Immediately when this all happened, because there was no information out there to any of us as to what the protocol is and what the directive is, I did get on with two folks who are current CAI members in competitive roles. And we talked about everything like, well, where are we going to, who's the resources you're using to get the proper PPE, proper protection equipment? Are you finding cartridges easily? Like right away, I started dialoguing with them about back and forth about what was going on in our own industries. So you're right, it was a huge help. And we did that within like the first 2 or 3 days of everything happening. And then also I've been jumping on these calls and reading what's coming out and looking at the newsletter. And it's just giving me a sense of what's important in the communities. Like I'm just go, go, go. And when I see something that comes up on the website or within the writings of, or a point that was brought up, it makes me stop and take pause and think, okay, is myself and my staff looking at this and giving the proper attention that these property management and the people on the boards are looking for? Are we doing that? So it's been great in that respect, and you wouldn't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the unique position where I get to sit on both sides of the table as a vendor to homeowner associations and then the board president of a relatively large homeowner association. So it's nice, seeing the massive information flow that comes from CAI in general and on specific topics. Now, for me, I'm just a hardcore networker. So a lot of the relationships that I have are personal relationships, but most of the people that we work with, like meeting Steve's firm, I met Steve's firm through networking, but then Steve's heavily involved in CAI. So it's nice to then, meet some of his partners, see what they're doing. He gets to introduce me to other individuals at the expo, and you get a lot of information there. And then obviously in doing our due diligence as a board, we're RFPing everything. So this way through CAI, there's so many contacts in terms of, making sure that we're getting 3 or 4 different bids on any project or any work or any vendor that we're working with. And it's really convenient. The other thing I'd say is that our property manager is extremely involved with CAI. She was the president last year of CAI, and that's really helpful because her networks are very, very deep in the organization. And this allows us to, really rely on them and piggyback on their expertise and make sure that anything that we're doing, they really have a clear understanding of what it is, because obviously we're still very limited in our scope as board members in terms of what we know and what we don't know. Unless you're a board member who also happens to be a property manager. So we might understand fiduciary guidance, what our fiscal responsibility is and how to read, a P&L and a balance sheet and how important, and I'm not speaking for all board members, as I'm sure all the managers on the call know. But even when we have board members like that, there's still, you don't know what you don't know, and being able to rely on CAI's resources has been hugely, hugely beneficial.
Yeah. So
I agree. Surround yourself with your professionals, and it's so important. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. CAI has definitely been something that that has been one of my cornerstones throughout this entire situation. I've noticed that our industry has banded together better than any other industry I can talk about. And Gabe, you've probably seen it in the financial industry as well. The amount of valuable information that gets shared between CAI members and on these calls is just incredible. And I can't tell you how many of these calls are just for a happy hour, just so that we can see each other and communicate and get back to what we want to feel is our home base. So I'd like to say thank you to the speakers. Thank you to CAI. I think it's been the best we possibly could have gotten through this pandemic, and CAI is really leading the charge. So that being said, I'd like to open it up to everybody else on the call. If you guys have some questions, I saw a couple people were writing in the chat function on the side. If you want to go ahead and reiterate your question, and we can dive into it for the speakers, feel free to do so now. If you want to throw your hand up in the air, either Angela or I will unmute you, and you can ask it verbally instead of throwing it in the chat. So go ahead, now's your chance to speak, or forever hold your peace. I don't see too many hands going up. That means I think our speakers have covered it. Still good. Chat function's looking pretty quiet. So I think at the end of the day, we talked about good, bad, ugly, and what's coming out of it. I think I've learned that the tone of our communities is changing a little bit. Kerri, you touched on that, and I think that's my biggest takeaway from the day. Is listen, we're going to have to address the pitchforks and the torches that are going to pretty soon be coming towards the clubhouses in our communities.
And just
for me.
communicate, you know, as much as you can with the information you have. I think that's just key. I know Cheryl said something about it in her chat about the complaints. Yes, the more you communicate, I think that's how we try to reduce the complaints. So if you get, I always say to boards, listen, if we know we're going to get all these questions in the meeting, let's address them in the meeting. Let's incorporate them. And then, you know, the owners will be like, wow, they really, you know, they didn't even know I was going to ask that question. If you anticipate all of that in your communication, you're a couple steps ahead, I think.
So the idea is communicate, prepare for the oncoming onslaught of unit owners that are frustrated, and let's just keep communicating and sharing the information and our experiences.
Thanks to Angela, Brooke, and everybody at CAI for doing that for us.
Absolutely, and thanks to our speakers.
Of course, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
We have to rely on each other. We're a big team right now, and we really need to rely on each other and reach out.
Absolutely, and we hit our hour long. We told you we'd try to stick with it. So please stay tuned. Again, we have a Tuesday event. We're going to be talking about reopening amenities. That's the topic of the hour. So let's see everybody on Tuesday.
Make that a 3-hour one.
Yeah.
And if you live in an HOA, be nice to your board president. They live there too. And they want to use the pool too.
Right. You mean everything's not your fault, Gabe?
Oh, it seems like it is, but yeah, we'll see.
Angela, you have anything else?
No, I just want to thank everyone. A lot of really good information taken away. A lot of good points. Thank you so much, all of you.
All right. Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
See everyone soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.